A very good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to those friends who join from other parts of the world to this fourth lecture on the webinar series on the theme Christian Leadership and Pandemic. On behalf of our director, Reverend Dr. Sam P. Thomas, I would like to extend a warm welcome to each of you. To begin our session, may I ask Madam Santini to offer a prayer?
Shall I?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay. Lord Almighty, we praise you. We thank you for this pleasant evening. In our weakness, we feel that COVID-19 is a long Good Friday without end. We have been learning many good lessons all through these days. COVID has isolated us, yet it is this COVID that brought union in many families. Lord, teach us to respond to the prevailing situation. Make us understand whatever we face is to learn better things and make our lives better. Fill us with your Holy Spirit and help us to brave all worse situations. Remind us always whatever we do is for your glory. Bless us and keep us good leaders to help one another in our society. We pray to bless today's speaker, Dr. Joseph George, moderator, Dr. Nesin Mathew, the organizers of the program, and all participants. We pray to you, Lord Almighty, through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the prayer. This evening, we are happy to have Dr. Joseph George, a well-known counseling professor who worked at the UTC for many years. Formal introduction will be done by our moderator, Dr. Nesin Mathew. Before I hand over the time to our moderator, I would like to introduce Dr. Nesin. Dr. Nesin Mathew is a PhD holder in neurophysiology from National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, NIMHANS, Bangalore. Currently, she is working as assistant professor at Christ University, Bangalore. She is very brilliant, and her field of study is how the brain works and how human brain functions. Thank you so much, ma'am. In spite of your busy schedule, you spare your valuable time to spend with us. I now hand over the time to Dr. Nesin Mathew, who will be moderating this evening session. And I request her to introduce our speaker as well. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. The pleasure is mine. We have a very eminent speaker today. Dr. Joseph George is a participating professional pastor counselor in Bangalore. He has retired from United Theological College, Bangalore in May 2021 after serving 29 years in the Department of Christian Ministry. During his tenure, he has held several key positions in the college, including officiating principal for 6 months. He has also been invited with the counseling training program and provided counseling service in the college. He has been also active with Doctor of Theology and Doctor of Ministry programs of the SSC. Prior to joining United Theological College, he was on the faculty of the Clark Theological College, Aoligen, Mongchang, Nagaland for 10 years. Currently is the president of the Medico-Pastoral Association, Bangalore, a residential rehabilitation for the mentally ill persons. He is also the secretary of the International Council for Pastoral Care and Counseling, ICPCC. He obtained his Master of Theology from UTC Bangalore and Doctor of Theology from Cantler School of Theology, Emory University, Atlanta, Georgia. He is going to talk today on pandemic COVID-19, pastoral care, and Christian leadership. I welcome you, Father, for the speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nesin, for that introduction and your kind welcome. And it's a joy to be with all of you this evening. Reverend Sharby Thomas Achan, Reverend Mindlun, Reverend Sugumar, and Nesin Mathew, and all friends here. I thank God for this opportunity to share some of my thoughts about COVID-19 and pastoral care. And we will begin with a video clip. So I request Mindun to show the video clip. Then I will start sharing the PPT. Yeah.
We were not prepared. As a country, we were not prepared.
इमरजेंसी केस है बहुत लो है बहुत ज्यादा लो है
सर एक बार चेक कर लो भाई भाई ये रोक ले क्या उम्र है इनका खोला हॉस्पिटल के सामने उन्होंने कहा ये साथ में भी आए थे
बालाजी काहे ऐसे कैले हाथे अरे जल्दी बुलाइए मुंह से झाग निकल रहा है बालाजी तू हमारा आवाज सुन रहा है
We were not prepared. As a country, we were not prepared. And it's really sad to see my mother go away because she was just 59. And she recently retired and wanted to spend some quality time with us. But all I could see is lying down on the... That's all I...
Okay. I want to share the screen. Mindlun, I want to share the screen.
Yes, sir. I put you as co-host. You will be able to see it.
Okay. Thank you. Should use the slide, no? Is it visible?
Visible, sir.
Okay. This part I have already done. We have seen numerous publications and articles and books during the last 2 years dealing with disturbing and horrifying human encounters around us in India and across the globe. Let me share with you a few of the challenging concerns, some of the leadership models that we observed during the pandemic, the need for a contextually relevant theology and pastoral care practices, and a long-term ministerial agenda, which is a post-pandemic. This is what we have seen in that clip. Second wave, death everywhere. Hundreds of places in India, the same thing happened. And the same week, thousands died without oxygen. Psychological distress, emotional pain that people have gone through. Look at that woman crying for her brother. There is no lot of losses around us, relationships, dear ones. And in the midst of that, we also see a lot of spiritual bankruptcy, which is explanations about our understanding of COVID. And the worst of it is COVID is punishment from God. Now, the question that this learned platform members should ask, what do we learn from COVID-19? And now they say even the fourth wave is on the way. So what do we learn? One of the writing that I like, it is a small article. It was published in April 2020, a year, almost 2 years ago, in the beginning of coronavirus. Tony Walter, Professor Emeritus, Culture and Death Studies at the University of Bath. He has listed 5 things about coronavirus. 5, as a sociologist, cultural studies person, his observation of what is COVID all about. Now, my observation is also that over the last 2 years, we have been faced with life and death questions all around us. Questions about meaning of life, God-given life. Questions about suffering and death, suffering beyond measures, and human capacity to endure. And what the scene we have seen, behind that, there are unseen truths, unheard pains, silent cries all over. Tony Walter talk about life perspectives change. COVID-19 pandemic changed life perspectives. Human communities all around, rich nations and not rich nations, believed in permanency and prosperity of this world. Claims of power and might is challenged. Views on life, how to live one's life is changed with the catastrophe brought by the pandemic. The thought, I can do everything, we can do everything, we have the might, is totally challenged. One could not stop the pandemic and the deaths. Hence, the value of life from a different scene, recognizing uncertainty and helplessness. What I observed, total depravity all around. My beliefs, values, security systems challenged. I am in control, I am in control thought process, philosophical explanation to God in control thinking. One good thing Walter talked about, a common positive thing is, in the midst of this common adversity, there is a fostered sense of community all of a sudden, which was the need of the hour. The second is power of nature over humans. Coronavirus, the tiny virus, proved mighty and too strong for human beings. And it shows the nature working, whether it is a created one or non-created, but still not problem not solved. But we go with it is a natural happening. It reminds human beings we are God's creation. The nature also God's creation, and we all part of the natural world. Hence, this pandemic calls the humans to be connected with nature, the entire natural world, as nature belongs to God. Humans are only human, as Bible says, and coronavirus reminds the world community about it. Humans are part of the natural world. Accept and affirm that that God-given identity, that is, we are part of God's natural world. Third observation he brought is power of unfamiliar connections. Lockdown, friends, families were not allowed to go anywhere. The old connections in which we have lost lot of confidence all got suspended. We brought in new connections. And these new connections, which are very unfamiliar to most countries, to Indians, but these new connections had functioned as caretakers and caregivers, frontline health workers, and others engaged in caring for the sick and the dying. And what more, new government approved burial professionals we have seen functioning at least for 6 months in many parts of India, including Bangalore. He also says it is an opportunity for lifestyle review. COVID-19 has created a space for us for personal and collective review of beliefs, values, attitudes, priorities, and lifestyles. And this is different from all the messages and WhatsApp sermons that we get about, COVID-19 is God's punishment on them. So God's punishment on the sinful world, sinful people, but this is very different. In the midst of encountering illness, suffering, and death, one is challenged to pause and ask pertinent questions about life and death. It also causes us to ask, Gospel talks about abundant life. What is abundant life in the context of this pandemic? And the last one he talked about is death needs to be talked about. Western communities, Western nation cultures, death is very distant from the real life situations. I was in some of the funerals in the US. As soon as the person dies, the body is taken to a funeral home, kept there for weeks. Then they fix a date for the burial. And till that time, nobody has any contact. So the dead bodies does not come home. India is not like that. We still have that. So that a lot of fear about death is not in our culture. It may come, but as of now. But Western, so in the Western culture, he's saying we need to have spaces where our fears, anxieties, worries about death needs to be heard, discussed, and resolved. And this points to the existential anxiety in the midst of the pandemic. We have heard, we have seen many friends, family members, people whom we know, people who do not know, passed away in other places. And we didn't have a chance to say a farewell. So this is the context in which we need to bring the aspect of death needs to be talked about. So what do we learn? What do I learn from this? Coronavirus, with coronavirus, all things changed. Nothing is permanent. Health cannot be purchased. Nature needs to be attended to. Leaders are not omnipotent spiritual beings. Acceptance of events as they come and wait for new learning. But now I want to ask all of us, our leaders, pastors, were not very close to this understanding when the pandemic hit. They were nowhere. Most of the pastors were not anywhere here. Leaders of all faith communities. And based on that, I made a little bit of analysis of personality of pastors in their actions, I found 6 different types of leaders or pastors, not only in churches, but also other faith communities. So we need to lock down, the March last week lockdown, and then reactions and responses from all communities, Christians, Hindus, Muslims, and 6 different types of leaders in action. The first one is the protesting leaders, protesting pastors. I had many friends who are pastors in different churches, including my own church, protesting against closing down the church. The argument is church is God's place and you cannot close it. Government order has no, we cannot go with government order, but we go with God's order. So the protesting pastors we have seen quite a lot among Christians and other religious leaders too. Kerala, in Bangalore, all over. And this is one very thing that we all need to look at, the type of pastors in action. The second one is resisting. They begin with protesting. Then, the protest does not have much effect. So they do things through the back door. They continue to resist. And that is why some pastors were arrested, some religious leaders were arrested when they were having religious functions within the restricted place. The third type is absconding leaders. Leaders who were very active, all of a sudden totally withdrawn from action, disappeared from the scene. Indication they do not know what to do. The fourth, opportunists. Opportunist leaders, pastors are the ones who try to use this opportunity for self-expansion. You might have heard many places, WhatsApp messages, you might have got, don't worry, coronavirus will not do anything, 40 days fasting and prayer. Even some of those pastors also died for coronavirus. Miracle, they claim on the miracle and say, we have the medicine. Baba Ramdev also done the same thing. He claimed that he has the medicine, but the government finally said, don't bring your medicine. It will not be accepted. So opportunist leaders who do not get into the difficulties of people, but try to do their own business expansion. Then forced volunteers. Forced volunteers are the ones waited for some time, situation not changing, no permission to open the church or religious place, but outside there are hundreds of people waiting without food. So situation forced them to act, and that is the forced volunteers. I think most of us fall into that. We all wait for some time. We think this will be over in 3 weeks. Nothing happened. Took over almost a year for my church to reopen the physical space. I think after 10 months for the physical meetings. Then genuine volunteers out of compassion for the broken people. Now, looking at these different types of leaders, this is an indication of what is their theology, ideology, belief system, and they have nothing to do with that, what Tony Walter talked about, the vulnerability of human community in the midst of a pandemic. So one needs to learn from the success and failures of leader styles and defects. in ministerial practices during this pandemic. This mandates the church to look anew on the theologies of God, church, life and death, and God's entire creation. This is where one needs to develop contextually relevant theologies, pastoral care, and ministerial practices. Now, I want to begin with the Bible, because in the midst of all the confusion and disturbance, there is no other place I could think of, like thousands of people look at the scriptures for help. Now it becomes more important because they're talking about the fourth wave, making all of us nervous and anxious too. One thing I like is written in the creation story, Genesis 2:7. The narrative says, God formed human beings from the dust of the ground. And so, body is God's creation. That is the first part of the creation. Second part of the creation is God breathed life into them. So life is breathed into the body. So the spirit in us is God's gift. Spirit in us is God's spirit, and our life belongs to God. This is where mind, body, spirit experience become important, and this helps us to say God as the source of life. And this affirmation is extremely important at good times and tough times. Now, we need to back to the Bible, faith, and tradition. I'm going to one important book we all read, all theologians sitting here read this book, Pastoral Care and Historical Perspective. And this book gives a great detail about how the early church, starting from the book of Acts, developed contextually relevant ministerial practices, pastoral care practices. So pastoral care theology and ministerial practices today must be contextually relevant, which we need to learn from the Bible, early church, and Christian historical traditions. So the Clubbers and Jekyll talk about sustaining, healing, reconciling, and guiding. And then two more items added by Seward Hilder, nurturing and empowering by Emmanuel Larty. So these are all with reference to the early church and historical, the church, several years into the life of the church till the later, the medieval church. So there is in this book has a lot of explanation about how the early church learned to do pastoral ministry as a ministerial action. Sustaining early church, in the book of Acts, we see each believer had to be strengthened. Most of them were from the downtrodden community. They were depend on their daily work for survival. But when they become members of the new group, the Act says they were scared to go out. There was danger outside. And so the leaders had to evolve support system, which we see quite a good amount of the such support system in the book of Acts. They had to do three different things: sustaining them in their faith, providing safe space for mental and emotional process, and sustaining them from physical harm outside. They were afraid the people would harm them. So sustaining is a compassionate ministry of taking care of people with a view to strengthen them. So what does it mean, sustaining the people of God? 2000 19, though it started, but India experienced 20, 21, and 22. Still a major challenge. Healing in the early church, creating a healing effect on the person, the group, the family is the healing ministries. A lot of discussion on life, health, illness, and death is in the New Testament. So the healing ministry of the early church, as well as the traditional church, it meant healing of the body, mind, emotions, spirit, and relationships. And it meant that there were times of pandemics. And during pandemics, the church officially engaged with taking care of healing ministries, different form of healing ministries. So the new directions, the healing ministry of the church is a major challenge in front of all of us. Third is reconciling. All the pastors sitting here, they have studied all this. They heard me speaking about this in their class. So the reconciling means restoring friendly relations. During persecutions, a large number of persons denied their faith because they don't want to be persecuted. But after persecution, they returned to the church. But majority of the church people said, no, we will not take you. So they had to evolve a system of reconciling them back to God and to the faith community. And this is where we see the act of confession and absolution. So the pandemic caused considerable amount of, today's pandemic caused considerable amount of controversies, inept theologies, and shaming conversations, telling people so-and-so died because of sin. I was shocked to hear someone talking to a woman who lost her child, who got after so many years of fertility treatment, etc. Yeah, God has taken and something wrong somewhere, like in the book of Job, people talk about. It's a shaming conversation. You do not know why that child died. Guiding, showing the way for someone, that is the guiding. Guiding functions in the early church. Believers were together, sharing, not only eating, but also ideas and mutual enrichment. But the elaborate guiding function became a necessity when the church faced enormous task of accommodating mass conversion during post-Constantine era. When Constantine was favorable to Christianity, masses become Christians, but they did not know ABCD of Christian faith. And therefore, they had to evolve systems of guiding persons, the basics of faith, and that also indicated sharing basic knowledge and matters of everyday life, including their vocation. So it's very important to look at that early church in the 4th, 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries. There, in the apostolic writing, there are references to basic knowledge sharing, advice on matters of everyday life, marriage and family, and then vocation, which is something very important. And how does this information help with regard to post-COVID communities, with regard to the educational ministry of the church? Nurturing, care for and protect someone while growing. Church, through the centuries, acted as a protecting agency for God's people through mental, emotional, spiritual care. So nurturing the young, nurturing the old, and different kinds of actions were there as part of nurturing. Now, pandemic stricken people of God within and outside the faith. suppressed anger, pain, distress, and other negative reactions. The woman who stood there and called Balaji, I think it touched all of us. And for years to come, she is going to live with that memory of her brother dying without getting even off. Lot of negative reactions. Longing to hear positive expressions in the community today, and that needs to become part of our nurturing ministry. Empowering comes from Emmanuel Larty and others. Empower means a process of making someone feel stronger, confident, and agency to claim their rights. Gospel has a lot of empowered actions. Jesus told the woman who was caught in adultery, you go. That was an empowering action. Samaritan woman, Jesus dealing with an empowered action. So the traditions, Christian traditions, talk about ministries to empower persons and communities. Most of the contemporary theologies, beginning with liberation theology, advocate the agenda of empowerment. Pandemic has shaken the world communities, making them feel vulnerable and powerless. How do we look at creating caring actions to empower the broken people within our churches and outside our churches? So the ministerial challenge, pastoral care challenge, is rehabilitating God's people. Pandemic has to be addressed, and any pandemic situation we talk about rehabilitation. So rehabilitation God's people. Rehabilitation involved 3 different elements: rescue, relief, and rehabilitation. So this is with a holistic view, which means physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual health. I'm sure some of us, all of us, are aware that United Nations, WHO, World Food Organization tell us rescue and relief is over and rehabilitation yet to happen. Indian Medical Association too, they go with the same opinion. Rescue and relief has happened. All this vaccination, getting all this rescue and relief. But rehabilitating the people who are displaced, rehabilitating people who lost everything, rehabilitating the victims of illness, and rehabilitating people struck with poverty and nothing to eat. So psychosocial, spiritual rehabilitation, and this is where I already said the Bible theology and psychology for understanding myself and others in the midst of vulnerability. This is to see God's image in human beings and in all God's creation, God's body and breath of life. We are responsible keepers of God's creation around, using insights and skills that come from God. Psychologists talk about positive inherent potential in human and their ability to adopt and adapt at all times. Self-actualizing tendencies. I'm sure Nesin Mathew will have more about this. Humanistic psychologies and recently developing positive psychology provides a framework with insights for understanding development and behavior from a different key. Ability to manage good times and tough times is an inherent capacity in everyone. Viktor Frankl, most of us are familiar with, a Jewish medical practitioner, 3.5 years in Nazi concentration camp, propagator of logotherapy, undergoing physical and mental suffering in the concentration camp, claimed a rebellious spirit that helped him survive. I capitalize rebellious spirit because that is something very unique, rebellious spirit that helped him survive, and that he helped others too. This is in the book, Man's Search for Meaning. When confronted with some suffering, illness, and death, Frankl began asking the meaning of life and death. Rebellious spirit, let me read this way. It is the God-given energy in all of us. That is the breath of life given by God. When body, mind, and spirit is taken care, we are taking care of God's breath in us, and each one in the family and in the community. Helping a neighbor in need is pastoral care. A migrant worker on the road needs God's help through us. Thus, we take care of God's kingdom. Future directions for pastoral care, going back to the basic functions: sustaining, healing, nurturing, guiding, reconciling, empowering, etc. You can add any number of functions from your own context. My sense and my sharing with you, as well as your further thinking and discussion, is this: new visions in the following areas. We have seen the collapse of hospital systems, medical system in every country. The most advanced countries allowed senior citizens and the vulnerable to die when the ventilator was needed for an younger one. It's an open secret people talk about, and doctors and nurses talk about. So there were many kind of WhatsApp messages, nurses taking off the ventilator from somebody, crying through the window of the hospital saying, I can't do it anymore. We have all seen that. Many countries, including India, many elderly died because they did not have access to the hospital, the ventilator. So this is in a way telling us we need to look at the healing ministries with a community focus, because we saw in the pandemic everything, the system collapsed. Second, educational ministries with a focus on the marginalized communities. Reports during COVID and post-COVID, reports of high school dropouts in many states in India has increased. And one study available, which is a study by this one of the channels, it's done in Andhra Pradesh, and they talk about 30% more 11th grade, 12th graders dropping out because they do not have the system, the finance, as well as the technology to continue the class. Somebody dying at home, these 17-year-old, 18-year-old go to work, earn and support the family. Many reasons, school dropout increased. And many people, many young, even young children committed suicide in different states in India because they could not have access to a smartphone or internet. We have seen that in all states. Hence, we have Christian schools. I'm not saying we don't have Christian schools or religious, we have, but they are all for the well-to-do group. There is good money to be paid. How many Christian schools in Bangalore has no fee or no fee? So educational ministries with a focus on the marginalized communities is a must, dictates coronavirus. Third, vision for the employment sector, which also mean vocational training and guidance. People who lost the job back home, native places. The migrant workers gone, most of them returned because in the village they could not find it. after about 3 months, when the lockdown lifted partially, they all came back to the working place, majority, but not the families. But the people in the middle class who lost the job, they are nowhere. We are not even talking about them. And as a result, there is a need for looking at the church, Christian communities must be looking at a new way of vocational training and guidance, at least for the next 10 years. Fourth, basic community formation and all-inclusive endeavor, which means the faithful, those who are within the faith community and those who are outside. It was very touching to see food sharing from the churches and other religious places. Not only churches did, but others also did, which I'm very happy about. And this food sharing with the needy has become something very kind of a pastoral caring action the last 2 years. And regularly they can be assured that there is one meal for them. And they come and they wait, they get the food and they go home. And this is something, should we not continue? A kitchen, church, parish kitchen that can serve for somebody around who can come sit there, drink water and whatever is there, eat and go. Future direction for leadership. Now, we have seen physical church meetings to online platform, now hybrid church, that's what I am doing. And so my church has both hybrid, means you have physical presence as well as the online. So those who want to go, they go to physical, but then others, they worship from home. And maybe physical again after some time, because today's newspaper said end of March, all restrictions going to end. So my sense is that what we need to look at is leaders with compassion, discernment, flexibility, and most importantly, not to think that they have all answers to human predicament. That's what we have seen in the 5 types of leadership. With this, let me stop and we will go for discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was indeed a beautiful presentation, which makes us all feeling that we are the arms of Christ. We have to do the work of this kingdom of God. Makes us feel more responsible. And you have guided also through the future direction. How can we help everybody who is around, and how can we make our life meaningful by serving and helping them in suffering, being a part at least to, even if it's a small help, it is worthy in front of God. Yeah, the platform is open for any queries and questions. Either you can type it in the chat box or directly ask. Yes. There is a question that came. Dr. Joseph George, thank you for the deeper understanding on pastoral care and Christian leadership. Depression led many youth with bipolar disorder during the pandemic. How can we give them the therapies and counseling? Kindly elaborate. This question is asked by Samuel. So, yeah.
It's a very good question. Depression led many youth, okay. It will be, there are a lot of literature already done studies during the pandemic about increased number of mental health issues among the youth. Now, generally, the youth college going the undergraduate level students, they say about 20% of people generally have depression tendencies. I don't know, probably Nesin can also give much more probably on that. But then during COVID, there's a platform called Your Dost. It is a counseling providing platform as well as research. They have done a study, and from this 18 to 20% in the previous year, it has gone to 42% during 2020-21 year. Many reasons they have ascribed. So increased number of people, youth gone into depressive tendencies, not into bipolar, but depressed tendencies due to various reasons. And, they were forced to go home. No, they were forced to be in the college, then they were forced to go home. And 24 hours sitting with the parents is the most difficult task. Parents say, do this and don't do this. So they began to react. So anybody with the anger and withdrawal tendency was also part of that research. So this question is important, but when it comes to if it is a serious clinical depression, that group needs medical help, psychiatric help, which is important, and same way bipolar, because bipolar is a very specific kind of disorder that needs psychiatric assessment. At what level is it mild, moderate, and severe? And based on that, there should be some medication along with counseling. So only counseling will not help with any serious mental disorder if it is in the acute, moderate or acute level. They need medical help too. Thank you for that question, Samuel Smith. Thank you, Mr. Eric. He was my colleague at UTC, so nice to see you. He was our bursar at UTC.
One more question has come. Dr. George, thank you for your lecture from the perspective of pastoral care and Christian leadership. During the past 2 years, many families have lost their loved ones without getting a chance to see the departed. Now, as you may mention that things are open to the normalcy in our country, how shall the church help these families?
Okay, good question. That is, it's very important that the dear ones lost, and there were many scenarios. Even if they died at home or in the hospital, family members were not able to see them, touch them for some period of time, about probably a little more than a month. Then they began to say, okay, they can open the bag and see the face, but no touching. So here also, it is a way that we are familiar with. The Eastern cultures have the system of sitting together and lamenting about the loss. And that lamenting of the loss, I have seen that in Kerala, I have seen that in Nagaland, everywhere. People sit together and lament about someone going away. That space for lamenting was deprived when somebody died in another district and the family members are not allowed to come. Another country, body was not allowed to come. So with such families, even with that woman, like, she calling her brother Balaji, there's a lot of pain inside. We have a lot of such people in our churches too. What we need is create spaces where such families can come together, look at each other, share their experiences, time for prayer, but not for exhortation, but it is a safe space for expressing their pain, which is something important the faith communities, the churches need to create now. If the lockdown lifted, pandemic is gone, that is something that is space for creating helping people to express their pain, and lot of pain and negative reactions. Thank you for that question.
The Father, we have another question from Reverend. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Among the Christian groups, some advocate against COVID restriction, giving some biblical references. What should really be the church guiding on this?
Again, a good question. That is a question between Bible and law. So, when the restrictions were forced, the agenda was to prevent large-scale virus, infection. And any church leaders, there were many I have heard also say, don't go with anything, nothing will happen. But some such pastors also died to go. So it's very important to look at what is our task, ministerial engagement. If the government says here is something danger, and you need to have some kind of a control on your movement, people are not allowed to come, that is something we have to go with the government advocacy in order to protect ourselves, protect others. Otherwise, it will be, we overdo things, and this many places were like that, talking about, don't follow any protocol, don't wear mask. You can meet people. Then the larger problem was do not take vaccination. You might have also heard some church leaders saying, don't take vaccination. Vaccination not required. These are all misinformed kind of agenda, propaganda people used, and this is part of that self-expansion group. So I do not go with that group. I go with the law of the land. Thank you.
I have a question, sir.
Okay.
During this pandemic, many of the youngsters felt that people are helpless, nobody is helping. So they are moving into an atheist point of view. What do you think about how can we help those children to realize that God is above all these things?
It's a natural, genuine, natural reaction to what is up. Around them, hundreds of people dying, no medicine, and nobody is able to help. Senior citizen home. So that's what I used one word in that first part of the talk, which talk about loss of religion and loss of faith. At this point of time, it will be very difficult to say, oh, but it is only give them natural space, whatever support they need, positive experience, good friends, then your prayer for them. So it should be more of an indirect way of supporting them, strengthening them in their faith. There is a lot of people who lost the faith, and a lot of people who have, lost religion too. So we need to look at that from that perspective. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Over to Minlun. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, Nesin. It was good that we could meet and you moderate the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the very insightful talk. Indeed, that was really insightful. And it was very beautiful to hear the types of leadership which you have brought out, which we can observe during the pandemic, the 6 types of leaderships. Some of our pastors, as you have mentioned, became a protesting leaders, one who resists or who is not willing to close the church or obey what the government asks us to do for the safety of all. Some becoming a resisting leader, or some even absconding, or in the midst of those, some became an opportunist, and some become a forced volunteers. The situation compelled them to do something. However, you have beautifully highlighted, some are genuine volunteers or genuine leaders. Out of compassion to the broken people, they come forward to help. That was really, really powerful to hear. And also you have given us a practical guidance on how Christian leaders should behave by drawing an example from the early faith communities. A pastor or a community or a faith community should be sustaining. That means sustaining the faith community and providing a safe space for mental and emotions. And also you have mentioned we need to be a healing community or a leader where we need to heal the body, mind, emotion, spirit, and relationship. And also you have highlighted how we need to be a reconciling community, reconciling with God and one another. And also we need to be a guiding community. And also, most importantly, nurturing and empowering. Yeah, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
I really like and would like to thank you for bringing out or drawing the future direction for the pastoral care towards the end of your presentations. That is healing ministry with community focus. And then the second thing that you have brought out was education ministry with focus on the marginalized community. And then the third future which you have drawn in your lecture, vision for employment sector. I think this is really the need of the hour. And finally, very touching, and which is really the need of the hour as well as the need for humanity, was food sharing with the community. Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
And also we would like to thank Dr. Nesin for moderating the session. Thank you so much, ma'am. And we request you even in the future to join us and contribute more. And also we would like to thank Madam Santini for the opening prayer. And most importantly, to all the participants, on behalf of the director, I would like to thank all of you for sparing your valuable time and joining us this evening session. For some of you, it might be an early morning. For some of you, it's an afternoon. But as of people who live in India, it's an evening. So we are all sparing our time and listening this wonderful and very insightful lecture. Thank you so much. And our next lecture will be on pandemic COVID-19, socio-economic impact by Mrs. Cynthia Stephen. We kindly request you to join even on next Thursday at the same time. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Good to see many of the friends here. Shirley, Emma Varghese, Sukumar, of course. Then what else?